Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Recaps and Reacts with yours truly, me, Sarah, where I just recap and talk about some of my reactions to shows or movies that I enjoy. And so as you all know, we are doing Scrubs right now. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to has come back to my channel. If this is your first time, hi, I'm Sarah. Please like, comment, share, think about subscribing or actually subscribe. And yeah, so we're gonna get to the 5th episode of Scrubs, which is titled My Angel. So we start off with, or we open with JD, having his inner monologue. He's walking through the hospital, observing what's going on, but he's talking on the phone to a chat bot. And he sees Amara and Asher. So remember Amara and Asher, they have a little crush on each other, the interns. He sees them communicating awkwardly because they both have crushes on one another. So he sees that. And then while we see Asher and Amara speaking, Asher is talking about his feet and how he has flat feet. Oh, because I think Amara compliments his shoes because he's wearing like these kind of clogs or whatever. And he says, yeah, I have unusually flat feet. So these are some special shoes. And Blake, being the wingman, he has a patient and he rolls his patient into Asher, which makes him stop talking about it. And he's like, you're welcome, to Asher. And then he takes his patient and as he walks off, he's like, no one wants to hear about your feet, man. So that was funny. So Turk sees JD talking to his chat box and Turk looking worried. He's like, I think you need to start dating. And this is the moment where I believe we're finding out JD has not dated. Maybe they've been saying it throughout the first few episodes. I don't remember, but JD has not dated. I guess it was kind of referenced in the 4th episode where he's moving into his own place, but JD has not dated anyone since him and Elliot have divorced. So Turk sees JD talking to his chatbot. And not only does he talk to his chatbot for, just about life things in general, but also finds out that his chatbot, JD has given it a name, and her name is Estelle. And Turk is like, this is not normal. We need to get you out dating. And JD's like trying to rationalize that it is normal. But Ralphie, I don't know how to really pronounce his name, but the IT guy at the hospital says that he has a chatbot girlfriend. They go out on dates and things like that. And when JD hears that, he looks at Turk and he says, yes, that absolutely is not normal. I need to start dating again. So then they both agree. The next scene, we cut to Sibby and Elliot having a conversation. And Sibby asks Elliot if she's thought about dating again. And Elliot says, no, she thinks that having relations, trying to keep it cute for YouTube, but trying to keep it cute, having relations is overrated. And Sibby kind of looks at her like she's crazy. And she says it's too late for her in life to start over and she's okay. So back with JD and Turk, they're talking in JD's office and JD mentions how he's nervous to start dating again. And then Turk says they need to go back to the club like the old days. And I don't know if it's a flashback or if that actually did happen, but it shows JD and Turk in these like ridiculous outfits at the club, living their best life, or like just dancing on the dance floor, having a good time. And there's like this lady watching behind them, this young lady watching behind them with her drink. And it looks like her friend comes up to them and she's like, wow, those guys your dads? And JD and Turk, defeated, just walk off the dance floor because they know they're too old to be doing that. So after them being defeated off the dance floor, it looks like they're like in the hallway of the club or something. And JD tells Turk, he's like, I really appreciate it, me helping me out, but I don't think I need to do or get laid anymore. And Turk gives him the craziest look and just gives him the hardest slap across the face, which is so funny. And then it cuts to the intro scene, the intro to the show. Next scene, we see Dr. Park. He makes an appearance. I don't think we've seen him since the 2nd episode, but he's back in this episode. And he's giving JD a hard time, busting his chops. And JD leaves. And Turk is like, why are you always messing with my boy? You didn't get the job. He got the job. Get over it. And Dr. Park is like, yeah, no. And he said, what happened to you, Kevin? We were in a bowling league together. We used to be friends. And Dr. Park, which I guess his first name is Kevin, Dr. Park is like, yeah, whenever JD fails, you and I can be friends again. And then he leaves. While JD's walking through the hospital, he ends up in the gift shop or something, and there is a harpist there. And he has a crush on her. JD goes up to the harpist and starts talking to her, kind of rambling. You know, he's a little awkward because again, he hasn't dated in a long time, so it's a little awkward, but he kind of finds his footing. But just remember that for later. Another subplot in this show, or this episode, is Asher and Elliot are helping a liver transplant. Asher and Elliot are helping out a liver transplant patient. Woo, say that 10 times fast. And I'm not really going to go too much into the patient, so I'm going to touch on this plot a little bit throughout the show, but it's not really that important, this part. So for brevity, I'm going to not really talk about this plot too much. Next scene, Blake goes to the nurse's station with a urine sample and drops it off. And when he drops off the urine sample, he sits in Francois's chair. Remember Francois and is a charge nurse, and it's like a little duo, a black man and a black woman. They're both charge nurses. We found out in another episode the male nurse is named Francois, and then this episode, I think it's the first time we hear her name. Her name is Pippa, the other one, but they're kind of like a duo in this new reboot or revival of the show, and they're pretty funny. But anyway, Blake sits in Francois's chair, and everyone just like stops and says, "You made the biggest mistake," and he was like, "What?" And they were like, "You never sit in a charge nurse's chair." And apparently this is some unspoken rule, but you just know about this. But apparently Blake did not know this. And Amara kind of sticks up for him. And they jump on Amara too. So now Amara and Blake are in the doghouse with the charge nurses. Dr. Park is there. And he tells them that you don't sit in the charge nurses' chairs. And they're like, why? And Dr. Park says, basically, in so many words, he doesn't say this verbatim, but he kind of uses some examples. But basically, if you disrespect the charge nurses like that, you're going to be doing everything that they're supposed to do. They're going to make you do it. So basically, they're not going to do anything for you. So Blake is trying to decide of a way. Blake and Amara are trying to decide a way to make up for his faux pas. And Blake says, we'll get them pizza. And he said pizza works for everybody. And then Francois overhears the conversation. Francois and Pippa, I guess they were probably eavesdropping. And they were like, hopefully that works. They pop in and they're like, that'll definitely work. And then Pippa says, get pepperoni. So yeah, that's going to happen. JD tells Turk that he saw the harpist and he's attracted to her and he wants to ask her out on a date. Turk is like, no, you can't do that. Basically, you can't date anybody that you work with, because Dr. Park is looking for ways to take you down and you're just giving it to him. And JD's like, Dr. Park has slept his way through this whole entire hospital. And Turk says, yes, but he's only slept with attendees or anyone above that. So he's not, I guess you can't get in trouble if you date someone in your position or higher. And so Turk says, don't do it. Do not do it. He says, unless the harpist is the chief of harpist, you can't do anything. So back with the charge nurses, Francois and Pippa tell Elliot that JD is going to ask a harpist out on a date and then ask if Elliot is getting back on the saddle. And Elliot's like, no, I'm good. And they're like, girl, you got to live your life. You need to get back out there. And she's like, I'm good. I'm fine. Amara and Blake are walking back to the hospital with the pizzas in hand, and him and Amara are talking, and Amara brings up to Blake that he's dark and broody. So while they're having a conversation, Blake's kind of looking over his shoulder a little bit, and he tells Amara that he's like, listen, there's a guy following behind us, and he's going to rob you. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. But there's someone in like a kind of like a semi, I don't know if it's a semi truck, but probably like a little tiny U-Haul truck in a sense, but and he opens the truck door and the guy runs into the truck door and gets knocked out and is unconscious. And Amara's like, okay, I'm gonna get my purse while he's unconscious. And I just want to say here, I am slightly confused as to why Blake was like, this guy's going to rob you, as opposed to just stopping the guy from robbing her. Like, I don't understand why that happened, but whatever. JD asks the harpist out and she accepts. They go to a bar, JD with his appletini, and I don't know what he got the harpist, but he's walking back to the table with their drinks, and they sit down and start talking. And the harpist says, we're going to have one drink, and then we're going back to my place. And JD's like, what? Okay. And this is a switch from the harpist that we saw in the hospital, but JD's like, yes. But he's also a little shocked too. So Elliot asked Turk for a favor. The favor for her liver transplant patient. Turk has to call JD for approval. While Turk is calling JD, JD's on his date with the harpist. And Turk or JD tells Turk what happened, what the harpist said, and Turk is like, don't do it! Can't do it! Blake and Amara are back at the hospital. They're talking with Sibby. And also, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but they took the patient, or excuse me, they took the robber back with them to the hospital because he was knocked unconscious. So they admitted him. But anyway, Blake and Amara are now talking to Sibby. Sibby's kind of talking to them about the robbery. And Sibby mentions that the police are there, but they want them to press charges against the robber. And Blake says, I'm not pressing charges over a $40 pizza, and kind of just storms off. And Sibby's like, wow, he is dark and broody. And this is a funny moment. And then Amara's like, yeah, kind of like Batman. And Sibby's like, I was thinking Tom Selleck. And Amara's like, who? And I'm like, yeah, everybody knows Tom Selleck. Come on. But anyway, it was funny. Dr. Park goes to Turk to ask him something, but Turk does not let him finish. Turk thinks that he is trying to out JD, and Turk inadvertently tells Dr. Park that JD is with the harpist and all this other stuff, and tells JD's business. And Dr. Park was like, yeah, I wasn't coming for that, but thanks for the info. But then we find out it doesn't really matter because Dr. Park says that the harpist is a volunteer. So as much as he would love to bust JD for it, nothing's going to happen because there's no rules against management or high-level staff to date volunteers. So Turk calls JD immediately and then says, you can get laid by the harpist. So back with Amara and Blake. Amara asked Blake how he knew that the guy was going to rob him. And then we find out Blake says that he used to hang out with guys like those. So this is why he does not want to press charges, because I guess the robber was like, could be, he hung out with guys like that in the past. So we find a little bit about Blake's, I guess, past. Because I do also want to mention too, Blake is older than the other interns, and I think they kind of touched on it in the first episode. But to me, I'll be honest that I feel like Blake looks like an intern, he's an intern, but he looks their age. Like, he looks like he's in his 20s, but I guess he's in his 30s. But to me, he kind of fits in, so I don't really see too much of a difference. I guess kind of he is more mature than them, but I don't see too much of a difference. But just wanted to point that out. So JD and the harpist go back to her apartment. They're about to do the do, and it's not what, or at least for me, the harpist is turned up. She ready to go. And so they start making out and things like that. And there's a pizza box by her bed, and JD sees that, and it's a flashback of after him and Elliot had relations, probably back from the first back in the early 2000s, the first generation of Scrubs. It is a scene of Elliot and JD just had relations, and they're in bed eating a pizza. And so it reminds him of Elliot. And of course, the mood is over for JD, and he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And the harpist is obviously upset. And JD has to call someone to pick him up. So we cut to the next scene where JD's in the car apologizing to someone. You don't know who it is. You're assuming it's the harpist, but of course it's his bestie, Turk. He's apologizing to him, and he says the last time he was with someone, it was really important, and he just needs more time. And Turk is like understanding, but slightly irritated, but it's his bestie, so yeah. So Asher and Elliot are talking to their liver transplant patient, and the liver transplant patient has to get a liver from someone who used to have hepatitis C, which she doesn't want because apparently the liver regenerates itself, so it's better than having no liver. So the patient is kind of upset about it, because also it's just important to know that this particular patient has gotten her hopes up where she thinks she's going to get a liver, and then something falls through or something happens and she doesn't get it. So this is the third time, and now she's like, I'm going to get somebody's sick liver. And Elliot's like, we can understand if you need time to think about it. And she's like, yeah. And Elliot walks out and then turns right back around, and she was like, get over it. Get the liver. Life is meant to be lived. This is your second chance. Live your life. You can still have a great life. It's not too late to have a great life. Slightly projecting, Elliot slightly projecting. But she convinced her patient to take the liver, and she does. This also inspires Asher to ask out Amara on a date as well. So we cut to the next scene where Amara is, I guess, I don't want to say eavesdropping, but sees Blake talking to the robber in the hospital bed, and Blake gives him a card and says, call this guy. He can really help you out. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be a doctor today. And so Amara is kind of looking at him longingly, kind of pining. And at that moment, Asher comes around the corner to, ask Amara out on this date, but he sees the way she's looking at Blake, and he just looks gutted. He looks so sad because he knows what that looks mean. He knows what that look means, so he's sad about it. Then the closing scene, we see Elliot and Asher wheeling the liver patient to, I think, the operating room. Yes, the operating room. And the pilot who flew the liver to the hospital comes in, and he's quite attractive, and he sees Elliot, and he asks her, he's like, do you know where there's anywhere to get coffee? And she says, yeah, I know where. And she walks with him to go get coffee. So we're going to assume that they're going to have like a little bit of a coffee date, and JD sees that, and he genuinely looks happy for her because she's moving on. And so, yeah, so that was pretty much the end of the episode. There was, of course, the closing credit scenes, which was cute. It was funny. I'm not gonna talk about it, but it was funny. But yeah, this was a good episode. I will say, I don't know if I'm a fan of, I don't know if I'm gonna love the whole love triangle. Well, I don't know if we don't know if it's gonna be a love triangle yet, because I don't think Blake will really be into it. And like I mentioned earlier, Blake is older than the other interns, so I don't know. And then also, him and Asher have become friends, and I don't think that Blake would do that to Asher. So we shall see how this is gonna unfold. So yeah, so we'll see for next episode. So that's it, guys. So yeah, I am covering some other shows. Like I said, that I'm covering is Rooster, another Bill Lawrence show. I got to catch up after this. I think the new episode of Scrubs comes out tomorrow, so I'll probably have that one done, that recap done next week, depending on when I actually release this. But it's coming soon, y'all. I'm trying to be timely, but y'all know life happens. But anyway, I'm also covering Rooster, and I'm covering Bridgerton. So if you're interested in those, please check those videos out. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. That would make me so happy. But, I'm also just happy for y'all just like coming across my videos and viewing them. So I appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for stopping by and spending some time with me. I hope to see you again soon, and I will see you next time. Bye.